Champions! Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy right now will get you a deposit bonus for a first timer of up to $250. Joe Idone from the Preferred Lines podcast is on to talk to me about the DraftKings picks, the final bets, the weather for the Wyndham Championship. But Joe, I got to ask you, have you jumped into any of the FedEx Cup PME drafts yet? You can say no, it's okay.
No, we do not have Underdog Fantasy down here in Florida, unless something has changed in the last month. But
you should be able to do drafts in Florida because it's not a pick'em game; it's a draft.
Okay, well, I'm not in any at the moment.
You need to go get in. So go under drafts on Underdog and then go under PGA. You'll see the PME Cup there. I believe it's 60% full already. So you draft for the 3 tournaments and you draft 10 players for the 3 tournaments of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and then you get eliminated by each one. So you need your team to consistently perform well. But we won't know who's officially in and out of the playoffs until after the Wyndham Championship.
Well, it sounds much more exciting than the actual FedEx Cup playoffs. Hopefully you get a nice little ending to it, and I'm going to get in there soon. Best of luck to everyone who's playing.
So everyone, get yourself in that best ball draft right now. Hopefully there are still spots come Monday, but there might not be. So you might have to try to guess of who makes the playoffs, and the winner of the Wyndham Championship may go undrafted if they play themselves from 130th into the top 70 in order to qualify for Memphis next week. Just a reminder, next Monday show I do with Feinberg won't be until Tuesday, and then on Monday, myself, Jeff, and Vincenzi are going through the power rankings, the unofficial golf power rankings. We have already recorded the show, Joe, because I'll be traveling, because I'll be at the Wyndham Championship in the rain this week. Do you think that there's any dispute of the top 3 players in the world if you had to rank them? Because Jeff's was not the same as Matt and I's.
I think there could be some dispute over number 3, and I think that there is room for constructive argument there. I have a feeling who Jeff's number 3 was, but
you're right.
It was probably different than the rest of your.
It was Beau Hossler.
Oh, what?
No, he had Rory over Bryson. We both had Bryson over Rory.
Okay, yes. I actually thought he may have even thrown Jon Rahm in there just based on like an overarching belief in the player that Jon Rahm is, that Jeff has and a lot of people share. But yeah, I'd have Bryson number 3. You got to.
Yeah, and then I think Rory's the close number 4. I think it's a good argument. The argument that I couldn't get behind for Jeff, as you will see, I don't want to spoil too much of the show, is he had Ludwig ahead of Morikawa, which just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, Colin has had an incredible year. I was actually looking at it when I was doing some Olympic prep, and the amount, like the level of consistency and the fact that he's just produced in majors. But winning is important, as we know. Winning is fleeting, but it also matters intently, especially when doing a power rankings. I think that you got to place a lot of emphasis there.
Well, Ludwig hasn't won anything either.
Hasn't won it. Well, is the RSM technically considered this season still, or is it one of those weird things where the fall swing isn't involved?
Well, does the Zozo count then? Because Morikawa won that.
Okay, so both, I think, technically part of the 2024 season. But yeah, they have not had 2024 wins. Yeah, Morikawa's had the better major run, though.
It is funny because I kind of comped Morikawa's season to essentially every other Xander season except for this one.
Yeah, look, I'm with Jeff. I think Ludwig is a better player than Morikawa. It depends on how you hold on.
Then the guy, he's a better player than the guy with 2 majors and better finishes in events that they compete against each other in.
I think in terms of here's how I view power rankings on like an NFL type deal where who's the best team, like you're willing to almost disregard record and what has had in the past. Like if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, who are you most afraid to play next week? That's how I'm ranking the power rankings. And I think that Ludwig strikes the most fear and winning potential in opponents.
Okay, I can see that in the future, but these are not future power rankings. They are current power rankings. Anyway, that's a fun discussion that we had. I laid out some of my points. You can hear a lot of Jeff's points are your points that you just kind of brought up. But it's a really fun show. Everyone tune into that one. But we're here to talk about the Wyndham, which means we have to talk about the weather in Greensboro. I'm bringing the bad weather with me, Joe. It's going to rain on Thursday and Friday. The winds don't actually seem to be that bad. And hell, maybe they'll get the weather wrong and it won't rain as much. And I'll get to actually play golf on Friday, which it does not look like I'm going to do at the moment. But Any chance they get the cut through on Friday, or is this most definitely into Saturday?
I think there's a chance. It really depends. Obviously, I think they're going to play preferred lies. They're going to have ball in hand. I think that makes an interesting argument on if you are in the standpoint of that increases the importance of driving accuracy or decreases. I think that they can get it in. It's just like these things I know from living in Florida and having this thing whipped through here 2 days ago, can change in the drop of a hat. So I still think you have plenty of time for improvement. Things could also worsen, and I hope that doesn't happen for the sake of this tournament and the sake of your travel plans, and the great people in Greensboro who are hoping to get this event. And I love this event. I know you do too.
Yeah, like I said, as the Wyndham Whisperer, this is probably this and Heritage are my two favorite events, which is funny because they actually comp to each other perfectly.
Yeah, Wyndham Whisper. I feel like I can this was the site of my biggest GPP hit ever. Finished second in the drive to the green here back in 2019, cashed a little over 100K. So I have fond memories. I feel like I'm a little bit of a whisperer myself. You probably didn't even remember that when you asked me to be on the show today, but I feel like it's fitting that I get the call up to the big leagues for the Wyndham. I love this event and have been fortunate enough to have some really good luck and fortune in DFS as well.
For whatever reason in my mind, I always thought it was next week in Memphis that you had your big win, but I think that was Baroff who won 200K at Memphis.
Yeah, Baroff won in Memphis, and then he won the huge. He had the huge Masters ticket as well, so he crushes it there. Wyndham, I feel like I have the formula. I know the recipe. It's just about getting to the chef's kitchen and cooking up again. So we'll see what that model spits out this year if I can land another big one.
So you're just betting on Chan Kim is your decided effort this week?
You're not supposed. We were supposed to wait for the 6K range for that, but yeah, the model that I have in place is a big fan of old Chan Kim this week.
All right, if you want the underdog slip that I'm going to construct for the Wyndham Championship, please go to the free Mayo Media newsletter that will come out on Wednesday evening. All of the actual final bets are going to be in there, along with the underdog play. Picked up we almost got the 12-1 last week. Ended up being a 6-1 because stupid Thorbjorn Olesen pushed in the first round, and then he went nuclear for the other 3 rounds. What are you going to do? That's what happens when you lose like 4 strokes in your short game as you go through the first round, yet still manage a nice even par round. Either way, my bets this week, I only have 4 of them in. 3 of them are the long shots that I gave out on the show on Monday with Jeff. So I still have stuff to add to this card. I bet Kuchar, Spawn, and CT Pan all at 100-1, all with 8 places. And then I found a enhancement boost on Brian Harman up to 42-1, and I bet that. It seems criminal that Brian Harman would not have a Wyndham Championship to his name. This is his course.
Yeah, agree with you there. I actually rated Harman, I believe, number 3 in the speaking of power rankings pieces that I put out on Sunday. Was surprised to see his odds come out in the 40s. It looks like some spots it's down to 25-1 now. But yeah, seems like right in his wheelhouse. He can play to his strengths at this type of golf course. And the course history hasn't been phenomenal for Harman here, which was a bit surprising. But he's streaky, right? He's up and down. He's tough to predict, but obviously major champion and the type of places that you look to play Brian Harman or places like Sedgefield Country Club.
The one that I kept coming back to, because I like Bobby Mack is one that pops out to me because his odds are disgustingly long now at 66-1. Keegan Bradley is 75-1. These guys are better players than the guys who were 30-1 this week, even if they're in worse form or it's not the perfect course fit. At what point do you just bet on talent?
I think this is a good spot, but this is an interesting one because I love always betting on talent and banking there on a guy that wins every year and a half to 2 years and you can catch a 70-1 on him. But this is I feel like one of the more predictive stops on tour where year over year we see a similar mold and skill set of the players. Not only is the players that win, but the players that typically make up a good portion of the top of the leaderboard. So I think that has to factor in. But if you can marry up a little bit of course form with what you're looking for, particularly this week, and take the upside of a win, I think that's where you got to look, particularly in the outright market versus depending on the contest you play in DFS.
So you're just going to say all South Koreans? Because when I won my big GPP at the Wyndham, it was John He, Siwoo. No, it was John He, Sung Jae, and Tom Kim were the leaders on that team.
I was looking back to my lineup right before this. I had a 30% Sungjae Im Chalk Meister Sungjae in that week. And I also had Siwoo Kim in there. So yeah, South Koreans go nicely with Sedgefield.
Yeah, past 12 rounds, we're just looking at approach leaders here because distance doesn't mean really anything at this course. It's a target golf course. Can you hit your wedges really well? It's Siwoo, Webb Simpson, Horschel, Glover, the Todd father, then Kisner, Harris English, Sungjae, Sam Ryder, Justin Rose, and Bud Cully. Then it's Shane Lowry, Svensson, Gim, Hadley, Lipsky, Ryan Moore. I think this is where Hadley made the hole-in-one to get himself into the playoffs, wasn't it?
Yes, correct. Hadley does have that hole-in-one here. Hadley's like it's funny that you mentioned Webb up there. I tend to link those two guys together often, and they both play well here. I had an incredible amount of chalk in that lineup that cashed for me. I also had Webb Simpson, who was like 30% that year. But there's 90,000 people in that contest. Nobody had my lineup duped. I think you can kind of play that at this event as long as you hit on a couple of guys sub 5%, and you got to pick the right ones. And that was that crazy year also that I was fortunate that Jim Herman won.
Yes.
So having the winner in your lineup didn't really matter because he ended up chasing down Billy Horschel that year. So, but we've seen weird stuff go down at the Wyndham, like that Herman win. I think Davis Love won here at like 500 to 1 or something, like 8-10 years ago. But yeah, it's one of those events where you pick a skill set and you kind of ride with it.
I vividly remember the Davis Love year because that was the year that Tiger played in this tournament.
Yep. Tiger chipped in on the first hole or something weird. But yeah, Davis Love seemingly well past his prime, maybe gives a little bit of hope to your Matt Kuchar pick.
Yeah, listen, I don't think the Kuchar's going to gain over 10 strokes on approach again like he did at Minneapolis, but I would assume he would putt better because he's a better putter than that.
Yeah, and he missed fairways in big spots in Minneapolis that you would think that would be a strength of his as well. So yeah, it should align perfectly. Kisner won here a couple of years ago. Webb always plays well. So just really accurate players off the tee who can lean on their approach play. It's the second shot golf course, like you kind of hit on with the approach play. So if he's gaining 10 strokes on approach or anywhere near that this week, I would expect him to make a nice little run again to end his season strong.
Beyond the names that I mentioned already in terms of approach, in terms of strokes gained total over the past 12 rounds at Sedgefield, there's a couple in here with like 4 rounds, 8 rounds, whoever it might be. But Cam Davis does really well at this course. Obviously, both of his wins are at the Donald Ross Design in Detroit. Nikolai Højgaard has been excellent in his 4 rounds. Ditto with Eric Cole. Taylor Moore is another one who tends to play well in Detroit too. He's up there. Matty Schmidt has done pretty well. How often is Matty Schmidt the leader after 9 holes in a golf tournament? Like every second tournament?
He's very good because Matty Schmidt just makes eagles like a lot. So that always helps on a 9-hole score quite a bit. He's up there. JJ Spawn has been returning back to a decent little iron play as well. So yeah, there are a number of familiar names, but some guys that pop definitely in the short term that I've got my eye on.
Wait, I said JJ Spawn when I said the guys that I bet on, right?
I don't think you did. No, did you mention Spawn?
Yeah, Harmon, Kuchar, Spawn, and Pan. I feel like I said someone that I
all at 100.
All at 100, yeah. Not Harmon.
Love that.
Harmon at 40, 42, the other 3 at 100. I like Spawn this week. But Spawn, I've been betting on Spawn every tournament for like the last month, and he just has one round that sinks him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be the case with a lot of guys 100 to 1, but you're just hoping for that 1 week. Like I was fortunate enough to have with old Johnny Vegas a few weeks ago. So I feel confident in betting the long shots. I feel a little emboldened by finally hitting one this year.
It's funny because I think every show that I mentioned the year that I bet Johnny Vegas at the 3M, and he came like 4th and just like, he should have won, let me down. Didn't even occur to me to bet him this time around. But I saw that you and a bunch of other people were just all over Johnny Vegas.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's been a weird year, Pat, where I don't typically do this, but I've started to think maybe I should evolve strategy a little bit, particularly in betting. And I've been looking at different options, and lately I've kind of landed on trusting some of the numbers, even if they aren't guys that I would typically bet. So like I took people like Johnny Vegas that week, and now it's telling me Chan Kim. So maybe I just need to put in a Chan Kim ticket, ignore what my mind and my eyeballs tell me, and trust the data.
Yeah, I mean, he's rates out great for me too. It's just when a guy can't make a 3-foot putt, it's very alarming.
Yeah, I know. Johnny Vegas, not a great 3-foot putter either, though. So it could happen.
Yeah, but his leg putting and his speed in the final round was
Oh,
amazing.
amazing. The guts to hit a 95 footer like on the last hole when you know you've got a two putt it was immense pressure, given that it had been, what, 7, 8 years since he won. Was highly impressed with that, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't flickering through some updated odds to see where I could get Gracerman at, because just having to knock that close, especially with that huge slope from 100 feet out. Super impressed with Vegas and how he was able to get that done in the pressurous moment.
I guess my problem with Gracerman this week would be his biggest skill is just so mitigated that he, like, even someone like Ben Coles, I think is probably a better player of like that tier of player, because this actually plays into his strengths versus the longer course where Gracerman can go full hog and get aggressive. And he's one of the few people that can actually do that at that tournament. Here, it doesn't really make that big of a difference.
Yeah, this is much more of a strategic thinking man's golf course than the 3M Open was. And I think that we've got a little insight into what goes on in Gracerman's brain when he just completely did not even have any care about preparing for the potential of a playoff. Even when he was sitting with like Amanda Balionis, he was like, yeah, I think the leaders are on like 15. There's a couple of guys up there. They were like on the 18th hole. He wasn't even paying attention to what was going on. So I think he's one of those guys, for better or for worse, that isn't going to deploy a ton of strategy, is just going to play his shots, and that necessarily isn't what is often rewarded at this Donald Ross course.
So I guess my final few points are, who did you bet this week? Because I've been looking, because of the rain and the sogginess, like Herman winning the Open, that's a big positive for me. That's the way that I'll try to translate it, along with the skill set that I'm looking at. But I found a Shane Lowry 28-1. Like, do I just bet that?
Listen, I was one of the people on Monday morning who jumped in on the Sung JM early number 16-1. I felt like I had to be there. I don't love right behind him Billy Horschel. I feel like Sung Jae is coming. And then I jumped into the 40 range. I took Cam Davis at 45. I took a 70 on my boy Denny McCarthy, and those are sort of my three big plays before I get up into some long shots. But that's where the majority, most of my bucks are on Sung Jae this week, which, top of the board, never one that I'm really all that attracted to, but at 16-1 is a little different than going sub 10-1. Although strategy worked out well nicely for you last week, my friend.
Yeah, even when you can re-up on a Sunday morning and get those big Scheffler odds 2 weeks in a row. I've hit Rahm, and then I hit Scheffler. Maybe this is just I just fire a single bullet at the favorite and just hopefully it ends up working out. I don't like it for this tournament though. Not to say the Sung Jae can't win. I deem him to be the favorite, but it's just 156 players at a course where anyone in the field can win this week.
Yes. And I think that when I talked earlier about sort of evolving my strategy, that's sort of where I've landed on, right? You get into these signature field events, you get into major championships. I think I need to shift my picks more to playing the guys at the top of the board. Is Scotty Scheffler more likely to win a 60-person event against the best competition in the world? Or is he more likely to win a sub-field event, with a weaker competition, but 156 players? I think that what's proven out is that he's more likely to win that big time event. He lost to Charles Schwab. He lost in Houston against Davis Riley and these guys that are sort of coming out of nowhere that wouldn't even be in these elevated events. But the fact that there's just more players, there's a different course setup, there's more variables in play. I think those events are harder to go to the top of the board, typically, especially when you're going, sub 8-1 than the elevated events. I think that your strategy was sound in sticking to the best players. I think that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah, I'll probably end up because I always say I'm going to do that at major championships, and that I don't do that at major championships. And you're like, oh yeah, the pretty obvious guy won. Probably should have bet on him. But for my final bets, again, you can find them all in the newsletter, because I keep circling around like Aaron Rye too. Like, is there a more Aaron Rye course than this course?
It's definitely one that's up there. It's 71st and a miscut his last two times. Give me a little bit of pause for concern, but nobody's been better. If you're looking at driving accuracy and approach play, nobody in the field is going to touch those numbers. It'll be interesting because I I think he's a very attractive price point. Like, is he going to be that guy that is 30% owned that you just need to suck it up and play? That chalky guy like Sung Jae and Webb those one year where you just suck it up and put him in your lineup and you've got to find a way to be different elsewhere. I think that could be, where Aaron Rye ends up this week.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Everyone who tunes into the Pat Mayo Experience knows from time to time I like to talk to you about some health supplements that I end up taking, and I've been doing Timeline's Mito Pure now for about a month. Feel great, and I think you can too. Take 2 soft gels a day for 2 months, and you can see significant improvements in your cellular energy, your muscle strength, and your endurance. That was the big thing. I've been golfing more this summer and lifting less. Yet when I go back to the gym for my once a week, like max lift, I'm not really atrophying that much. I'm not losing a ton of muscle, which is absolutely fantastic news for me and my golf game, because if you work out too much, then you get too sore, you get too stiff, you need to retain that flexibility. I'm retaining my muscle mass at the same time, although I'm not working out as much, and it comes in 2 product designs to fit your needs. They're berry powder, which is great to mix into your breakfast, yogurt, or daily smoothie. That's how I've been doing it. I've been eating some strawberries, raspberries, blackberries with a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of protein powder, then boom, Timeline's Mito Pure right on top of that. Or they have soft gels for the days where you're just on the run and wanted something convenient to grab and go. So, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of Mito Pure right now. So go to timeline.com/mayo to get that 10% off. All right?
Let's jump into the DraftKings picks then and try to build out some lineups. Tambo and I always start with what's going to be the chalkiest lineup of the week. What do you think that's going to be? Where are people going to start? Is it just going to be insta-click Sung Jae? Because that's really what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Sung Jae, basically double Lowry, triple Horschel, and like Siwoo could be 20. Cam Young is getting a lot of love, but I just don't see that coming to fruition. So it'll probably be like Sung Jae, Harmon, Sung Jae, Cam Davis, Sung Jae, Aaron Rye. Like those would be the most logical starts for me.
Yeah, kind of surprising to me that Brian Harmon is sort of projected so highly owned. I thought people would be more inclined to go, Akshay is so popular as a player. I think people just gravitate toward him, especially at a nice price at 9,100, which is a nice discount off what you would have paid at the 3M a few weeks ago. Davis Thompson, I love. I think is a great course fit. I think if he's, 8% less owned than someone like Brian Harmon, that'll be where I go. But yeah, I think most people, especially in the 10K range, are just going to click Sung Jae and then look to build from there.
I think I would go Lowry over Sung Jae. I'm just coming around to Lowry, and then when he just misses every single putt, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is why I don't play Shane Lowry. But if it's going to be soggy and the green's presumably a little bit slower, I think that favors him.
Yes. Lowry's putting regression at the Open Championship, you could kind of see coming from a mile away. And it finally happened. And you know what? I was actually kind of impressed with how he was able to rebound on Sunday, coming back from a very frustrating Saturday and still finish 6th there. It's been a really strong season for Shane Lowry. When you look at it, I mean, he has the team win, but a couple of 6th place finishes in 2 majors this year. He finished top 20 at the Masters as well. I think a very underrated year for Shane Lowry on the whole. I just think for me, course form is the difference there, and paying up $400 for Sung Jae Im when you kind of have a better expectation of what you're going to get. 4 top 15s in the last 5 years versus Shane Lowry, whose best finish is a 23rd. I'm going to probably end up going Sung Jae.
So Sungjae, Harmon, Rai, Cam Davis, Siwoo. Those look to be the big five in terms of ownership from above $8,000. Below that, I'm pretty confident to say Eric Cole will probably be the highest owned guy at $7,700. And then it's just a crapshoot. You're going to get a big split in ownership between Gracerman and Denny and Jagger and Svensson, Gim, Griffin, JJ Spawn, Novak, McClure Messenger, Brendan Todd at 7,000. Like, these are all players that everyone seems to be using, and one of them is going to end up super highly owned, but I could not tell you which one it's going to be.
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling that's going to be Denny McCarthy there, but I could be wrong. But you're right. It's everyone's going to go to Eric Cole. Cole hard cash game. I think you got to play him 7,700 if you're playing cash. If you're going to play a GPP, you've got to make some decisions based on the rest of your lineup. But it feels like this is a very attractive price. It's someone who could be coming back into form and has definitely shown some early signs of it. Who are you going to play there? You're going to play of struggling Will Zalatoris or Keith Mitchell.
You could play Rose for the same price. And if you just talk about talent, I mean, I like Eric Cole enough. He's not Justin Rose.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think JT Posted is like a nice option as well there at 7,900, which it always plays well sort of in this region on Bermuda grass, has won multiple PGA Tour events. So there are options there if you want to fade Cole. I just think it depends on contest selection.
I can see that. So I have an idea for a type of lineup. Let's try to build up this chalk one. So I got Rai, Im, and Cole in so far. That leaves an average of $7,600. Do you think that the next click for people in this sort of lineup is CT Pan at 7,000, maybe Chan Kim at $6,900? Because that seems to be the threshold where people are going. Because if you put in Chan Kim for Chan, get him in the lineup, you're back up to 8,000. And then if you throw in CT Pan, also fits the Asian theme of all the people who do well at the Wyndham Championship. You get back up to 8,900, then you get Cam Davis. So it's Im, Cole, Rai, Davis with Chan Kim and CT Pan.
I love that. And Davis and Rai are both chalky there. Plus, the CT Pan, definitely people are going to gravitate toward based on the price point. I think if the goal of this lineup is to build the chalkiest lineup, that's the way to structure it.
I think that's the way it would go, unless you don't use Im, then you can upgrade everyone else in this lineup. So Kim and Pan end up becoming, I don't know, let's see, McClure, Messenger, and Andrew Novak at 71, or Gim and Ben Griffin at 73, or Svensson at 74. I think that's where the upgrades would come in. But I have a fun lineup for you. There is one player I did want to get your take on, and it's Nick Dunlap.
Yeah.
He's won twice this year.
I know. Not a guy I typically get right. I was like, the ownership is going to be incredibly low on a two-time winner, sub 5%, without a doubt, because people are going to want to go to Taylor Moore, Denny. Lucas Glover's a defending champion here. You've got Adam Svensson, who people love to play like myself. Incredibly low ownership. Obviously, we believe in the high upside there. I think he could score a lot of points. I just worry somewhat about the course fit for him based on what skill sets are typically rewarded most here. But winning matters, like we talked about, and doing it twice and having that confidence and going into especially second tier PGA Tour events, you feel like you can show up here and win any week. And I think that he has that confidence.
Now let me throw another lineup up you. If people have been watching the screen, I made a $8,000 player lineup with nothing left over. So how about this one? Aaron Rai, Højgaard, Bobby Mack, Dietrich, Keegan Bradley, and Justin Rose.
I don't like Nikolai Højgaard this week.
Why?
The rest of those picks I can all get behind. I just don't. I just not a player that's going. I don't have his points projected very high. I think that he's highly inaccurate off the tee with the driver, and that's going to hurt him this week, in my opinion.
Okay, we can throw him out of this lineup, and that gives us 8,400. I put Bobby Mack back in, so I know I was supposed to take out Højgaard. Take out Højgaard. You could put Harris English or Mav McNeely in if you wanted to.
Okay, I'll take Mav McNeely.
Oh God, I guess you don't need him to win, so it's not that big of a deal. But it's the same.
Yeah, you don't need him to win.
It's the same basic construct. Like you could find a way to put Clanton into this if you really wanted to as well, and play like Glover instead of Rose, that kind of thing, or Cole in this lineup. But like, I think about the talent in this field. And this feels like a very talented lineup to me. And even if they're not exactly the best course fits, like if you really want to make the case for Minwoo at 1%, I'm not going to kill you because he might be, on a peak Minwoo week, he's going to storm the field. It just doesn't feel like the right course for him. Cam Young, I would kind of say the same thing about. Who knows with Spieth? He's probably injured. But if we're going to talk about Sungjae, Lowry, Siwoo, Spieth, and Billy Horschel as the top 5 guys in this field in terms of pricing, like they're not markedly better than the guys I just listed off in the 8K range.
I agree with you there. It'll be an interesting week. You mentioned Spieth. I wonder your sort of take on him. It's an interesting week based on where he sits. It's a familiar position that we kind of saw Justin Thomas in last year. Needs to get inside that top 50 to even be in signature events. Talked about the injury today. Just been a weird season for Jordan Spieth. Like his scrambling has been terrible. And that's what I think of. Like you think of long-term Jordan Spieth 6 years ago was the best scrambler on the planet. He can't do that anymore. But he's hitting a ton of fairways. Like his driving accuracy is fantastic. I just wonder the motivation level for him to try and end the season strong, and has to be like reaching for that top 50 point.
Of all the guys who are not currently inside the top 50, I don't think that Spieth has to worry about not playing in the signature events.
Okay.
If Webb
just get the Webb Simpson invite.
Yeah, if Webb gets an invite to everyone, you don't think they're going to line up to give Spieth those invites?
Makes sense.
So I mean, I think there is motivation. I do really think like he's had this wrist injury for 6 months. Like just as Jeff kind of pointed out, like just deal with it, man. Like go get the surgery.
Yeah, you're right. He's just delaying the inevitable, and the more he delays it, like I know there's got to be some recovery time there. I'm not sure exactly what it is. He's been vague on that himself, but you don't want this to like stop you from playing in the Century. Like you need to be ready at the start of the season to go.
Well, he's not going to be in the Century, so that's not a problem.
True, but he may get that special. You don't have to be a champion anymore, right?
I guess you have to make it. I think you have to make it to Eastlake for that one in order to get. And be a winner. I think those are the two provisions to get into the Century. It's just tough for me to go to him here. I'd rather pick off one of the other low-owned guys in the 9s. Like Minwoo, I think is the very clear standout of that bunch. But even Davis Thompson or Akshay, like they're not going to be quite as low owned as Minwoo. But I take all those guys over Spieth.
Yeah, I love Davis Thompson. He's the one for me. He's an unbelievable scrambler around the green when he gets out of position. Won the John Deere a few weeks ago. I just believe that he's a stud. Like he's up and coming, and him being like is going to be one of those players that we're really looking out for next year. Clanton, like, where are you at with Luke Clanton? Because how can he be at 8,600 and you look at another, essentially an amateur, like the same age guy in Nick Dunlap, who has won twice, who is significantly cheaper. Just feels like the pendulum has swung and he's too high priced for me to get behind.
He might be, but the results have been pretty good for him. I mean, when he was a 10-1 favorite to win a PGA event, that was kind of laughable, and people were betting on him. They were betting him and Thorbjornsen. How could they lose? It's like, oh yeah, my guy Rico Hui ended up just blowing it, so he could win. And then Harry Hall ends up winning that event, which was actually really fun to watch, except for having a bunch of guys in that playoff who couldn't do anything in that playoff, including my main man, Pierce and Cootie, who legitimately cannot gain stroke. He's like me playing out there. I completely reinvented my swing, and my game used to be all irons and all putting. Now I can't hit an iron, but I drive it like 280 off the tee straight.
Oh yeah, I've seen it in person. Yeah, you're hitting it long. Your iron play was pretty good the day that we played. It was if my memory serves me correct, it was the putting that got you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not my putter. That's not my fault. On a course where they play PGA Tour events. Could not get the speed down with the new putter I had in my hand. But since we've played, my irons have gotten worse and my driving has gotten better.
So who's your player comp right now?
It's probably Pearson Cootie. He's just driving it and putting. That's all I'm doing. Which
Cootie, man.
Which at shorter courses where I play is fine because I can hit like sand wedge into every hole.
Yeah. No, if you stick a 4-iron in my hand and I'm a dead man, yeah, that's where I got to be. If my driver's off, it just makes the entire difference in my game on what I shoot. I know the show isn't about that, but if my driver's doing well, I think I can score. If not, I'm going to shoot 90.
It is a pure confidence thing, because I'm the same way. If I'm not hitting my driver well, just I have zero confidence in the rest of my game to pick it up. Where if I'm hitting it well, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's fire at this pin.
That's right.
But would you start lineups with Davis Thompson?
I think you can. I'm going to play Sungjae. I don't play. I've talked about this before with you, but I don't play a ton of lineups. It's usually I enter 3 per contest. I'm going to start with Sungjae and try to squeeze and then go Davis at number 2. I think if you want to just stack high on those 8K guys that you named, and there's a ton of good options there, where if you can find one of the winners, I think Davis Thompson does play really well. I really like his long-term upside. And I just think just a young player who I think is coming.
So with Sungjae and Thompson to start, you get $7,500 left for your final 4 guys. Where do you go next? What's the next click?
So what my strategy is, Pat, usually is to go find my cheap guy.
Chan Kim.
I want to go down into the 6K range and look for a good option there. I mentioned Chan Kim earlier that I think is solid. I also like Matt Neesmith. If we're talking 6K range guys, he was right there in that playoff as well with your boys. Top 10 at the 3M. He's had some decent finishes at this event. He's made 3 out of 4 cuts, which is, you want a top 30 on a 6K guy, which is really what you're looking for. But has started to turn it around with the driving accuracy, and the approach numbers have been trending in the right direction. So I usually go down to the 6K range because that's the one that I want to find, and then make my choices from there and try to find some 7 and 8K guys.
All right, so pick. Do you want both Neesmith and Chan Kim, or do you just want one of them?
Let's just do Neesmith.
Okay, so $6,700 Neesmith. We're back up to $7,800. There is actually a little mini pocket of players here that many people are not using. And I like obviously I bet on Kuchar, so I like him. But beyond him, Victor Perez, he just came top 5 at the Olympics. Now no one wants him, and he's a pure fairways and greens guy who should play well at this tournament. Seamus Power has the perfect game for this tournament. JJ Spawn, who I also bet on, is here, and they're all going, I don't want to say criminally under-owned, they're just not being owned.
Yes. JJ Spawn is one that I've got my eye on. You mentioned Kuchar. He's one there. I don't know about Victor Perez. You're right. It comes down to whether you believe that he is just going to have some fatigue and natural exhaustion from the Olympics and the emotional run that he was on. I'll probably just stay away. But those guys in the low 7s either. I really like Mac. Is it Meissner? I don't know. The guy's playing really well and hitting his irons awesome lately. Mark Hubbard just missed his first cut of the season. Before that, I think he made 19 straight, and has played pretty decent at this event in the past as well, right there at 7,100. I think there are options in the bottom of the 7K range if you look under 7,500, and you can take your choice on a couple guys there.
Well, try to pick another one then, or where do you go with your 4th pick? If we put Neesmith into this, what is your next selection with 7,800?
Let's go Matt Kuchar.
Kuch? Okay, so you like Kuch enough too?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that gives you 88,000 for the final 2 players. Do you want to go high-low? Do you want to stick in that range? Do you want to do like a Eric Cole, Bobby Mack type thing?
I like that. I like Eric Cole, but I love Bobby Mack. Look, I think he's underpriced here. Speaking of guys who have won twice, the dude's done it in the last 2 months. Awesome scrambler. I understand that he's got problems from time to time with driving accuracy, but it's been better of late, and I really trust his ability to scramble around the green. Scores awesome on par 4s, which I think is kind of the key to unlocking this course. The par 5s, everyone's going to eat those up. The par 3s aren't overly hard. You've got to keep it in the fairway, and score on the par 4s is really where you separate. So I love Robert McIntyre, and I think if you can pair him with Eric Cole, you've got some high-end upside there on a couple of guys who can top 15.
Do you have any particular leans towards players who do better with lift, clean, and replace versus ones that are generally okay, but all of a sudden you get them to clean their ball, get a preferred lie, and then all of a sudden they're pin seeking? Because if Siwoo feels that way we haven't brought up Siwoo yet, he is Mr. Wyndham.
I know. Siwoo is awesome here. I have him 7th over the last 5 years at strokes gained total, but you're right. It was just, he got crushed by the withdrawal in 2022 there, and then a 33rd last year, but 5th, 3rd, 2nd before that. Unbelievable approach player. Exactly. extremely accurate driver. He was in that one, the one in 2019, and I think he like hit one into the hay or something like that, but it felt the entire time like he was going to win that tournament. The Jim Herman storm from behind late, but yeah, I don't know that I have a particular stat just looking at rounds that players have lift clean in place versus rounds without it and seeing a separation level there. I think you just lean on driving accuracy because I think it's all that much more important. You put your ball in your hand, it turns into point and shoot for these guys, and it just gives an added bonus to players who hit the fairway often.
So the best players, there's 8 par fours. You mentioned par four scoring being very key this week. That's the separator. There's 8 of them from 400 to 450 yards. If you go to fantasynational.com/Mayo, if you don't have it yet, get yourself 20% off, use all the stats, and get that app into your hands, which you're really going to want to have. The best players over the past 36 rounds from holes from that range, 400 to 450 yards. Your guy, Mac Meisner, Brian Harmon, Alex Smalley, who I believe is local, because this is the first time I remember hearing of Alex Smalley. He was just some dude from Greensboro who played really well at the Wyndham.
And went to Duke, I believe, too. So, yeah, he's a North Carolina boy.
Sungjae, and then Svensson. Those are the top 5. Tambo's guy, Putnam. Roger Sloan, who lost in that big playoff and we all bet on him that week. Lauer, Pan, Ben Griffin, Ramey, Pierce and Cody. Davis Thompson, Rio Hisatune, Ben Silverman, who I do like at 6,900 this week. Then it's Clanton, Rye, Bez, Griot, Bobby Mack, Shane Lowry, Bhatia, Kuchar. Like those are, I mean, I could just build a team of all of those guys and go on my way.
Yeah, those are the scores. And particularly even when I broke that down and looked at like birdie or better rates on the par fours there, you get Clanton, Spawn, McNeely. Carson Young is another interesting one down that we talked in like the 6K range of an extremely accurate driver of the ball, played pretty well at the John Deere a few weeks ago, who I think has some upside if you're looking for one of those 6K guys. You just got to hope that he can chip and putt, which is the case for a lot of guys in that range like Chan Kim. But you're hoping for that one good week like we got with Vegas a few weeks ago where he's proficient.
Is there anyone from the lower sixes that you like at all? Because my numbers are telling me Norlander, Sloan, Shez would be the ones if you're going to go that low. Or Merritt, I guess.
Yeah, my numbers are saying Ches Reavie as well. It's spitting me out Grayson Sig, which I don't love because he's missing a lot of cuts. I think Carson Young is the guy that I have a lot of interest in there, that I mentioned before. Ramey is also coming off a top 25 at the 3M, which is pretty solid for him. And then not really anyone below 6,500. I think Carson Young is as low as I'm going to go.
Is it shocking? It's not shocking for me to see it, but Nick Taylor's just randomly $6,800 because he's not good anymore.
Nick Taylor and the other guy was shocked at the price, but then I start looking at the numbers and I'm like, I guess this kind of makes sense. Was Adam Hadwin. Like I would think this would be a great course fit for Adam Hadwin, but rated out extremely poorly in my model and is just not hitting his irons well at all. But does have a top 10 here 3 years ago. I thought this would be a nice spot for his game, but those two Canadians, man, a lot to play for those guys. Hopefully they get a good week.
Yeah, well, right now it's funny because this is happening all over again, just like it did 3 years ago.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, 2 years ago when Pendrith didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden he was on the President's Cup team. It almost feels like that's going to happen again.
Who's going to be the guy? You think Hadwin maybe? Maybe Mac Hughes makes a late push?
Well, it was so clearly Nick Taylor for the longest time to be the other Canadian on the team with Connors. And then, like, your default would be like, oh, yeah, it's probably going to be Hadwin then if he plays well. But they're both playing so poorly. Pendrith gets the win. He continues to play pretty well that he just, as soon as the summer, like, the heat hits, Pendrith starts playing a lot better.
It's probably Penrith, you're right. Svensson maybe could sneak it if he finishes, like, top 5, or he probably honestly needs a win, and this would be the week he can check it off. But, yeah, kind of shocking just from a sticker price standpoint, even from a DK salary or an outright odds to see him higher priced than both Hadwin and Nick Taylor, who I think most of us envision over the last couple of years have been much better players.
The fairway finders in this field, if you're looking for them, past 36 rounds, Ben Coles is number 1, very good wedge player as well. Terrible putter, but, sometimes guys putt all of a sudden. Ask Johnny Vegas, right?
Yeah.
So it's him.
Who else is up there?
Coles, Rye, Garnett, Carson Young, Brendan Todd, Moore, Reevy, Daniel Berger, Glover, who won this event last year, obviously, Nate Lashley, Jim Herman, who has won this event, Gim, Hubbard, Svensson, Damon, Harmon, Zach Johnson, Merritt, Matt Kuchar, Eckroat, Putnam, and then Clanton, and then Brant Snedeker, who's also won this event.
I know Clanton just rushing fairways, hitting greens in regulation for a guy that you just look and you're like, oh, he hits at 185 miles an hour. He's just a bomber. He's hitting a ton of fairways, hitting like 75% of the greens in his tournament. So beyond impressive, I just feel like I'd rather take my chance, and the stock may be a little bit inflated. Brendan Todd's an interesting one because here's a guy with good course history, 2 top 10s in the last 3 years, right up there in driving accuracy, right up there in course fit, and also one of the bubble boys, right on the line of the top 70 this week with a lot to play for. Seems like it's kind of this Southeast Bermuda region that you would look to maybe play. Brendan Todd right there at 7K flat is a name that I'm starting to come around to as well.
I can see it, and his form is good and exactly how you would envision it. Like, he's not driving the ball well. He's driving it accurately, but not well. The irons are like, but the chipping and putting is out of this world good. But this is a course where his accuracy matters versus the distance, so he probably will gain strokes putting this or driving this week, or at least be field neutral. Mm-hmm. And if it's more wedges than anything, like, he is one of the best wedge players on the planet.
Yeah, and in Brendan Todd Kuchar, right? Like, Kuchar is going to be highly owned, but if you rule out the last tournament they played, Todd's probably the guy who's had a better year and would have probably been higher priced, but one tournament sort of flips that narrative on Kuchar. So those are some of the things I kind of like to look into. Maybe you can get a little bit of, I don't know where the projections are at on Todd compared to Kuch, but it feels like he's cheaper. He's going to be lower owned. And I think looking long-term beyond the last event played, he's still right now at this point a better player.
Have Fantasy National users generating him at 6.3% of their lineups, but the actual calculated ownership is right around 10%, which is right around where Kuchar is. And then I see Griot 2%, who's exactly the same as these guys, but just is a worse putter.
Yes, is a worse putter, but yeah, he does share some of those skill sets, and it could be a nice little, everybody loves to play a little Griot every now and then. You just got to pick the right spot.
Yeah, so right around Todd, no one's using Griot at the same price, and no one's using Putnam at the same price. And, like, they're all the same guy.
Yeah, all the same guy. And then Pan's kind of in that boat too, but Pan's going to be highly owned as well. So Griot maybe at 2% is the big pivot that you could make if you want some serious leverage.
I'm coming more around to Clanton the more we talk about this, because I just don't think that people are going to click on his name.
Really?
Yeah. I think people will say they will do it, but then they're going to, like, how could you be there and be like, Luke Clanton is $8,600 coming off a miscut at the 3M. And then you have Keegan, Dietrich, Bobby Mack, and Højgaard directly below him and cheaper. You're like, well, those guys are real players.
Yes. And Ryan Davis right above him, who everyone's going to gravitate towards. So you could be right. The fact that, I talked earlier about not letting the eyeballs kind of fool you and letting the data do the talking. One of the most accurate drivers in the field, one of the longest drivers in the field, and he's hitting a ton of greens in regulation. You do those things pretty well, and it allows you some forgiveness on the greens to not putt your best. It just still feels like a high price point to be, but maybe I just got to get beyond that and see sort of the leverage position that you can get based on the other guys in that range.
He has gained strokes putting in 4 of his 5 starts on the PGA Tour. He cannot chip, though. Like, he is awful around the greens.
I don't have chipping factored in a ton here. Even though I do have scrambling, I don't have a lot of around the green game. What about you?
I don't either. It's one of these things that anytime, and listen, it's going to make a difference. If you lose 3 strokes around the greens, you're not going to win the tournament. But you also can't be missing that many greens to really rely on your chipping if you have any chance of winning.
Right. Exactly. That's kind of where I have it too. The greens aren't overly small. You just got to hit a ton of them in regulation. You've got to be good from like 10 to 25 feet on the greens. And I think the variability there, as we know from DFS, is a lot greater than other areas. You stick to a guy who's really awesome tee to green, and you usually have success. And the numbers are telling you that maybe the best one in the field right now over the last 20 rounds is Luke Clanton.
That will do it. on the Pat Mayo Experience. Thanks for breaking this down with me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Wish you safe travels, man. Always awesome to join you. So thank you so much for giving me the call up this week. Best of luck. Enjoy the Wyndham and hope we have another big week, baby. Wyndham Whispers. Let's do it.
Yes. The Preferred Lines podcast, you can sub to that on YouTube. You can also download the audio version as well, correct?
Correct. Audio going live here on Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. if you want to check the show out on YouTube, if you get that before then. If not, you can always catch the replay. The podcast audio version will be out on Spotify and Apple Pods tonight later as well.
All right. Well, this isn't dropping until Wednesday morning, so you saying that's in the future is actually in the past for people. So you can check out the Preferred Lines podcast, already out on the Preferred Lines YouTube channel. You can follow Joe at TourPicks on X as well. You can follow me at the PME. Sub to the newsletter for all of the final plays on Wednesday evening. Sub to the channel, sub to the podcast, and go to Underdog and use code MAYO for a deposit bonus of up to $250. Thank you all for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!